wonderful Sarah. I'm sure you all know Sarah's history and backstory. Sarah and her mother launched Colette, one of Paris's most iconic concept stores, back in 1997. Sarah's had a very unique take, I think, on what a fashion concept store could be, and really pushed forward into quite diverse fields, whether that was streetwear or beauty, design, food, and she'd bring these together into a space, offering a really diverse selection for visitors to the shop, but also, I think, questioning what a collaboration within fashion could be. She curated these. I was reading these figures earlier, and I was like, oh, it made my brain ache, the amount of work this must have been. You curated over 200 exhibitions for the Colette gallery space, and you planned thousands of window displays, because you used to change them weekly. And also, you initiated countless collaborations with various different brands, some of which are going to show behind us as we speak. Colette closed in 2017, which was a devastating news for most people within the industry, but it's meant that Sarah started out on a new journey through a consulting agency, Just an Idea. Just to tell you a bit about me, so you know that why I'm here and why I'm talking to Sarah. My name's Lou. I'm a writer and a curator, and in 2017, I published a book on collaboration within fashion that was called Fashion Together, and it focused on different duos within the fashion industry. Some of them were duos, like a photography duo like Mert and Marcus or Inez and Vanud. Others were design duos like Victor and Rolf. Others sort of had less tangible partnerships. So some of them were kind of designers and stylists, or a Milner with a designer, or some of them were even, it was kind of hard to describe what roles both of them had. So an example of that would be Rick Owens with Michelle Lamy, or Riccardo Tisci with Maria Carla Boscono. And I really sort of took a big dive into the world of collaboration. And sort of to use the book as a starting point for the questions, part of the reason that I wanted to work on that book and that I had the idea for the book was it felt like collaboration became such a buzzword within fashion. And around that time, it felt like brands were constantly working on collaborations. Designers were interested in collaborations. You couldn't open a fashion magazine without some kind of piece about collaboration. And I think it has become incredibly popular. But it also manifests in lots of different ways. And I wonder, what is true collaboration to you? It's a really big question.
Yes,
sorry.
I don't know how to define true, not true. But I think a successful collaboration is, I'm sorry if it's so obvious and cliché, but when it makes sense, when the two entities bring something to each other, and when you can still recognize the signatures, the identity of each in the final products or expression of the collaboration. But there is so many different kind of collaboration.
And can you talk to me about some of Colette's history with collaboration and your history with collaboration? Because often what I found interesting would be how you would champion a kind of collaboration between a high fashion brand, so say Valentino, with a mass label, whether it was someone like IKEA, or often you'd bring together a very zeitgeisty brand with a forgotten treasure that like a younger consumer potentially wouldn't even be aware of. And can you just talk me through sort of how you conceived of that way of collaborating, and tell me about some of the ones that you thought were most successful? I'm going to try and open this bottle, which I have absolutely no idea how to open.
So we opened Colette in '97, and with already the motto, style, design, art, food, mixing all kinds of products. And our goal was to propose products we couldn't find anywhere else. And that's how, working with the brands, selecting products in the showroom, I would start to ask a special color, a special version on one item, and brands proposed me to do collaboration, but at the beginning I didn't want to put just our logo on Colette. I thought it was not interesting, so I would introduce brands to brands, artists to brands, to do a product special, exclusive for Colette. And with time, we finally used our Colette Blue, our dots logo, to twist some products to do collaboration, because it was a good moment, or a good opportunity to give our clients something exclusive. And it was very open mind. Like you say, we didn't care if it was with a luxury brand or something more affordable. It was both with streetwear, with design, little gadgets, with fashion brands, and sometimes related to the gallery. There was no rules. But at one point, it became really too much. Some brands would immediately propose me a collaboration, and I would always say, wait, I would be interested, curious to see what you are doing before to do something with Colette's name. And
It's interesting, kind of the way you talked about this idea of creating something new, because I do think there's been this this conversation in fashion for a while around how to pull in a consumer, and often you do see it where brands feel that they have to always offer something exclusive. So whether it's a new colorway or a new capsule, and was part of it kind of having to respond to that market where a consumer was so thirsty to have something new or different or exclusive. And how did you balance that between doing things that you were really genuinely excited about and sort of having the commercial aspect to it?
No, I mean, of course, collaborations are not new, but back in the days, in 97, early 2000, it was not as common as it is now. And we would, again, we had no, in our selection for Colette, we could have some products we would find but elsewhere, but it was a way we would mix, introduce them together, which would make it different. And it was more a process, very organic, working with the brands to try to have something exclusive, and it was easy at the beginning, and the more it went, the more they would say, oh, look, we have to do bigger quantities, we would like to sell it through our own website network. And I noticed this with, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I replied exactly
No,
your question.
You did. It's interesting because you said, collaboration wasn't such a big thing back in 1997, and it is interesting, I kind of mentioned it already, the popularity of collaboration. And I wonder if we've sort of done full cycle where there is a little bit of consumer apathy around collaboration, and something that once seemed really exciting and quite unusual now feels like another sort of marketing ploy. And I wonder if people are more cynical around collaboration, particularly when it comes to things like the use of logos. You said, like, oh, we didn't want to just put logos on things. But also, I guess, this idea of selling out or problems of appropriation. And I just wonder if you feel like there has been a bit of a sense of apathy.
I clearly think there is a saturation for collaboration, and some customers can't stand the word, or some brands or some designers can't stand this word anymore. And of course, there is still space for collaboration when there is a real authenticity behind why it's happening. And I think customers and brands can make the difference. But we have to be careful to not think because it's a collaboration, it's going to be successful. Because it's a collaboration, I will have tons of press. It's not as simple. And I think at the end, what counts is to have a good product. And
So when you're advising clients now as a consultant, because you said, that it has to have an authenticity. How do you get that right? Because obviously it also needs to feel unexpected, right? You want to be like, oh wow, this brand is working with, I would never have put them together. That's often why collaborations can feel really exciting.
I try to look into the values of the brand, the history, and also it counts when it's launched. Where for Sakai, who did recently a pop-up in Paris, I suggested French brands like Petit Bateau for kids, Hervé Chapelier, who is not the most trendy but a classic bags brand, and APC, which was very natural because Chitose from Sakai and Jean Twitou from APC, they knew each other, and it was a great synergy, and it worked, and it remained very limited. And but it's great when it's unexpected, and it's also. I think there is something very surprising the way collaboration happen. It's people who meet each other. Sometimes it can happen very simple, and when there is too much strategy, marketing, I don't know if you saw today, there is an announcement for the collaboration between Palace and Jean-Charles de Castelbajac,
yes.
which is kind of unexpected, and that's the beauty of it. But now, because I was Supreme and Jean-Paul Gaultier, I don't know what will surprise us and what will be, oh, this is so unexpected, because there is every day more surprising collaborations.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think it's very hard to do something that feels surprising or shocking anymore. And I wonder what was the point where we reached kind of peak collaboration. I feel like, so much was written about when Louis Vuitton collaborated with Supreme, and I wonder if it just felt like that was a moment that sort of solidified this collaboration mania, but also was maybe the last example of something like that, which you mentioned, which was a collaboration that was kind of truly surprising, even though in some ways it was quite natural and expected, given the interests of Kim Jones, who was the designer there at the time. Do you think there was a turning point, a certain era of fashion where...
Well, clearly, it was a strong message and a momentum in the world of collaboration between high fashion brands and brands coming from streetwear, skateboard. And I think it came naturally because lots of collaborations started with street sneakers brand like Adidas and Nike, trying to be part of the fashion world, and they worked more and more with fashion designers. I think Nike with Riccardo Tisci, or Adidas with Alexander Wang, Gosha Rubinski. And after Louis Vuitton, Supreme, more recently Palace and Ralph Lauren, Kiss and Versace, or Fendi and Really. And I think the high fashion brands try to get the coolness from the younger brands. And for the young streetwear brand, it's, of course, lots of visibility and a certain credit. But now, after all these examples, what's next? How can it still work on the distribution count? Because at the end, Louis Vuitton, Supreme, it was fantastic on the runway and the image on the products, but the distribution was more a problem than something else. How to drop, how to launch these products without avoiding all the line problems, the resale. Now it's going to be maybe auctions. I think when you originally designed this collection, this product, you don't realize all the process.
No, definitely. It is interesting. You mentioned it there, sort of how the dominant sort of theme of collaboration within fashion has very much focused on this high-low thing. It's like a luxury brand working with a streetwear or a sportswear brand, and perhaps it is more unusual to see collaborations between two different high fashion labels, and I wonder why that balance of power has been the way it is, and also I guess what it says about the state of fashion at the moment and the way that fashion is trying to communicate, or the type of audience that fashion is trying to speak to. Like, do you see that the sort of focus on that high-low collaboration as being a good way of summarizing the general theme of the industry at the moment?
Yes, I think there was this moment where high fashion wanted to be part of the phenomenon of the streetwear industry and the expansion of, or you can see all the sneakers, collaboration or not, in the fashion brands. But I think it started even before with the high street brands, with when Target worked with Prensa Schooler, or of H&M with Karl Lagerfeld, Uniqlo with... and after these high street brands invited these fashion brands, I think fashion brands realized the potential to work together. And the recent example is Moncler Genius inviting, it's not a collaboration, it is a collaboration collection purpose, inviting like 5 or 6 designers to work within Moncler. Moncler always done it, but in a more discreet way. And recently, I think with the Genius project, they show how one brand can have all this, instead of one creative designer in the brand, to invite these different fashion brands and to rotate every season. And it's a way to renew themselves. And
yeah, it's interesting that the Moncler Genius project has been so successful, because it has come at this time where you do expect that people will be quite apathetic to collaborations, but that has worked so well. And I wonder if it is because, as you say, it feels less like a sort of marketing ploy and more like a genuine attempt to kind of consider how they can push the principles of design within that brand.
As long as it's a great experience for both, I think for Moncler to have the creativity from these different brands coming to collaborate for 1 season, 2 seasons, they bring a lot of freshness. And for this designer to have the capacity, the production from Moncler, the histories, this production and this visibility, everybody is a win-win. The clients too, because it's a limited collaboration which happened from the which we wouldn't have from Moncler alone or from the designers alone, I think.
Exactly. It's interesting because one of the things that I thought about when I was working on the book and when I was interviewing different pairs, because in the case of the book, it was less about short-term collaborations, and it was more about these long partnerships. So it was a kind of interesting way of considering what a fashion collaboration can be. Because a lot of the collaborations that we've talked about have been more seasonal things or one-off projects. But one of the things that I noticed, both through talking to the different people featured, but also just through analysing sort of the coverage of collaboration at that point, was this change in the industry where it felt like when I first came into the fashion industry, and potentially it may have been the same for you, there was such a dominance of the idea of kind of the star designer, so like the single, lone, genius creative. And there was so much press around those people, and they were really sort of hyped and built up. And it felt like there was a turning point while I was in the years up to me working on the book, where that idea sort of fell from favor slightly. And potentially it was because of the coverage and the attention paid to people like Alexander McQueen or John Galliano, who struggled with the pressure of that role. But I saw sort of younger brands really embracing this idea of working as a team or coming up as a collective. And then in turn, at some of the major luxury houses, you did start to see people from behind the scenes being promoted forward. So the really obvious example of that is Alessandro Michele at Gucci, who'd worked at Gucci for years and years and years, and then is now, so pivotal in the sort of sense of contemporary fashion at the moment. And I wonder what it was that caused that change, because that is sort of a step in collaboration in itself, is this idea that fashion is about teamwork and that isn't about individuals. I wonder what it is. Like, is it a reaction to the pace of fashion? Is it like a better understanding of mental health and the issues around being a single person, trying to take this huge pressure? I just wonder if you've noticed that as well. So that was a really long question.
I think it has always been a studio for a teamwork, even if there was some genius. But I think it's part of our times with we want transparency and maybe a little of the Instagram effect, where a designer will feel comfortable to share this backstage, behind-the-scene moments. And a great example of this is Kim Jones, when he came out from his first Dior show with Yoon from Bambush, who collaborate on the jewelry, or communicate on Matthew from Alex, who helped on the accessories. It's true, it's a great moment for designers to say they are not alone, and it makes sense. And I think also of the great Marc Jacobs videos when he prepares his shows, where he really is transparent around the work, the big teamwork before the show. And I think maybe there is it's important to understand the creative process is this conversation, this teamwork. And I think we would have still loved in the past. Now maybe it's the tools make it easier to express, and maybe the big fashion brands tend to give this special place to the top designer. But I think it's part of, like you say, it's part of our times to understand, to appreciate this work for in the collection.
It's really interesting that you mentioned kind of the effect of social media and this opening up of like the process of fashion, because I wonder if collaboration is also in part, well, this obsession with collaboration amongst consumers and brands is also partly due to social media, because I think what has happened with things like Instagram or Tumblr is they've made your average person, your average consumer, more interested in ideas of context and displacement and bringing together disparate images or ideas, which was previously quite like a high art idea, right? Whereas now it's something that everyone does. They'll regram an image or bring together two disparate images to say something. And I wonder if that's also what has created the kind of appetite for these mishmash collaborations, because they kind of speak to that collaging process that we all engage with.
I think so. I think our brain is now thinking with this kind of collage, and sometimes it can be quite confusing to see on social media some dream collaboration, some crazy collaboration that just someone did by himself on Photoshop, and you don't know if it's really happening or no. And yes, it's this social media, this quickness also, this desire, appetite for always new products is part of provokes that there is collaboration when you can't manage to deal with you just by yourself. Even if I think collaboration work only if behind you have a strong brand, a strong identity. You can't accept few exceptions where they only work through collaborations. I think it's important to also have your own path and to add this.
I think people can see through when it's just a very obvious, when someone's doing it for the money or they needed a kind of income boost. I think a consumer is much more savvy about that now. One of the things we were talking about it back there, which is, so when I was working on the book, Andrew Bolton, who's the curator at the Costume Institute at the Met, wrote the foreword. And he titled his foreword 1 + 1 = 3. And in the foreword, he wrote, fashion by its very nature is collaborative. And I guess I was interested in that idea as well, in the ways in which collaboration runs through the fashion industry. Because a lot of what we've talked about here is final product. But I'm interested just from your experience in working in the industry, how important the kind of behind-the-scenes collaborations it is, whether it's the conversations or the kind of long-term friendships and relationships that help sort of define the aesthetic or output of different brands. Because you've talked so much about how for a collaboration to work, a brand or a designer has to have a really strong identity, and often they've come to that identity through collaboration in itself, maybe just longer-term partnerships. And I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
I think, like you said, longer partnership is important too, because it shows it's not just a one-off. I see this image of the stripe. It's just a little parenthesis. It's something we did when Nike launched this new jersey for the PSG French team, and I asked 10 French brands, not only French, sorry, comme Des Garçons, Hermès, Longchamp, to do this marinière stripe product for Colette Window. And often I think of this moment, it will never not be possible today. I'm sure all the brands will say no, thank you.
Why do you say that?
Because they realize how collaboration became some, not dirty, but became not negative, but became too obvious, and you have to be forward of the next process. And it's everything is in the moment. Louis Vuitton Supreme 2, it was this moment, it makes sense. And sorry.
No, it's interesting. People being more skeptical of it.
Yes, and we speak a lot about fashion, but of course there is great collaboration in design, in beauty, in music. It's part of a creative. I think in fashion, in the same when you say ask about the behind the scene. I think music, when you have to work with an artist for the cover of your record, when you have to find a stage to perform, or even before when you have to record, find the right studio, it's just part of the process.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the music industry, because we were also talking about this backstage, so it's in my head. But so Virgil Abloh has this show opening in Chicago at the Museum of Contemporary Art, and I've written the essay for the catalogue. And one of the things that I was thinking about was how fashion design, that process has changed today, and how a designer, someone like Virgil or others of his generation, they approach making fashion more like how we would typically think of making music, in particular hip-hop music. So you think of this concept of sampling, which is so common within music, like a few beats from a certain song or a recognizable sort of lyric. And I wonder if that's also part of the way that fashion design has changed. It is more about this process of, it's such an overused word, but this process of curation. And a lot of designers talk about that. Like someone like Jonathan Anderson will quite openly say, I couldn't cut a garment, but I'm a creative director. And that's also a form of collaboration. It's kind of uniting disparate elements to create a brand. And have you noticed that? Because I imagine with the brands...
Absolutely, and I think Jonathan Anderson or Virgil Abloh are the perfect example of this generation, this moment, who feel comfortable for Jonathan to work with Converse or with Uniqlo. And when you see a Converse designed by Jonathan Anderson, it's not just his name on it, there is a real research behind it, and it's become part of his collection. And of course, Virgil is... we can't speak about collaboration without the example of Virgil, who can design a turntable to IKEA collection, to his brands. And it shows that now also we don't have to question so much, and we just have to do it, to experiment. And I think it's a beauty. There is no more boundaries, no more limits between all these different fields. And that's great. That's very positive. That everything is possible.
Yeah, you're right. It is unthinkable. If you think 20 years ago that the creative director at Vuitton would be doing a range for IKEA. Like, you can't imagine. It shows how much time has changed. I'm conscious of giving other people time to ask questions, but I wonder, obviously you've worked on so many different kinds of collaborations, some of them smaller, more one-off things, others, these quite big partnerships bringing people together. Is there like a dream collaboration that you've either wanted to do yourself, that bring together, or that you would just love to see? Was there one that you, or even a couple that you could never quite get off the ground?
Now it's really difficult to reply this question because there has been some dream association when I think of Apple with Hermes or with Chanel with Pharrell. Maybe I would have said that, but after, between the dream and what you see as a result of this association, maybe it's still a dream what could be made possible together. I'm not sure if I'm very clear, but I know I look forward to the next stage of collaboration. Now I see with TV series, with all the pop culture, it has always been part of the process of collaboration with fashion brands, but with writers, with... I know that there are so many possibilities, and that's exciting.
I love that you talked about TV series. Can you imagine if they did like a Game of Thrones Killing Eve collaboration or something?
Voilà, there was Game of Thrones with Vans, or I think of Stranger Things with Topshop or Louis Vuitton. It's exciting. I think the brands know how to seduce.
There's a lot of avenues left to explore. Yes. Exactly. Does anyone have any questions? No? Yes? Ah, that makes life easier. Well, if everyone could join me in giving Sarah a big round of applause. Being so fascinating.
Thank you. Thank you very much.